I don't know if you can see or not, but I've already made out the initial sketch of the painting that I'm going to be working on, and the area surrounding the sides and the top will be probably, I'll probably make a black, basically because the painting, the actual painting itself it looks like the artist painted it, and it was in a dark room with a shaft of light shining in on the main individual in the painting, the print collector. But anyhow, that's what we're going to be doing, and I'll probably be using a variety of pastels. I'm not going to be using the Van Gogh line chiefly. I'll probably use the Van Gogh line in my Secure Craypas brand as well. As I mentioned before, I do use the Faber-Castells, and I'm just using the package to store my Secure Craypas pastels in. Those are the plastic case is a very good case for storing them and transporting them and whatnot. As you can see here, I have gone in and bought 2 packages. What I've done is bought 2 packages and drilled holes in the bottom side of them and put a hinge, mounted them with a hinge that you can get at an arts and crafts store, and that holds the 2 cases together. It's very convenient. Okay, so as I said before, we are going to start off. I'll make a link in the bottom, a color chart on the colors that I use, so that you can see, and I will also go along and mention which colors I'm going to be using. So anyway, we're going to get started. Okay, as I mentioned before, this Van Gogh brand, I bought the 60 quantity set, 60 set, and this is a color chart of all the colors that was included in the set. And as I mentioned before, there's different shades of colors. I've got the set comes with at least 2 colors, 2 shades of color. I don't know if I can zoom in here or not. Show you. There's 2 different yellow ochres here. Let's see if I can zoom in. Oops, that's the wrong way. I don't know if it's going to focus on it or not. Yeah. You can see there's 2 different shades of yellow ochre. They're labeled 227.7 and 227.5. The way the Van Gogh's brand work, the lower the number, the darker the pastel is. And as I mentioned before, they make, oops, opening the camera there. They make 2 different shades. Oops, go ahead and zoom back out. Let me zoom in a little bit. Alright, there we go. They make 2 different shades, and those really are very good for the tinting and toning, as I mentioned before. As I was mentioned before, I'm making a color chart with a scrap piece of paper, which I have here, and as you can see, I make marks just for color reference, color values rather, as well as blending techniques to make sure that the colors blend the way I want them before I do the actual painting. And if you're new to doing oil pastel paintings, it's a good idea to do practice pieces. Just basically, you can make a color chart and you can see how they blend. These Van Goghs, they blend very well with just using the finger alone. But it would be a good idea to get familiar with how the colors go down, is to either use a color chart like this and you can scribble out, and or you can use the color sheet chart, I believe, if you will. That's what I call it. But anyway, I'm going to set this aside for here. Just set over there for now, and we will get started. Let's see. I'm going to start with. I guess I'll start with the floor first and the foreground. Generally, when you're doing paintings, it's easier to go. Especially if you're doing landscape paintings, you do from the background to the foreground. You start with the background first. That way, you're like putting trees over the sky, for example. It's easier to do that way, so that you can you won't have a problem with putting pigment down. I myself struggle with doing trees and foliage, and but anyway, that's another matter. This is a different painting. This is not a landscape painting, so let's get started. And I'm going to start with using the number 718.8 warm gray, which I believe is this one, maybe? I think this is the cool gray. Yeah, 17.7. There's one thing I don't like about this pastel set is when you first get a new set, they're hard to get in and out of the package. They tend to stick. And as you can see, oil pastels are going to be kind of messy. They're about the equivalent of soft pastels and or chalk pastels, if you will. But this is the 718.8 warm gray, which is this color here on the color chart. I don't know if you can see it or not, but that's what we're going to start with on the floor here. And like I said, this is going to be a base layer, and you just put down some pigment. One thing I like about oil pastels is a little goes a long way. Oil pastel sticks, they last a lot. I've gotten a lot of landscape paintings done. I more or less do landscapes versus portraits and or still lifes. I like to do still life sometimes, and in fact I was thinking of doing a still life before I decided to do this one. Basically what I do is I get as close to the edge as I possibly can and just put down some color. And in the original painting, the shadow line looks like it's about right at his ankle. So we'll make that the hard edge from the shadow. As you can see in the, I put up a reference photo of the actual painting on there so that you can see. And when I'm getting up close to the edge of an object I don't want to put pastel on, I I just get as close to it as I possibly can. And then I take my turpenoid and I'll have to set this over here out of the way. And then I just take a paintbrush. Usually I use brushes that are made for oil and acrylic. With oil pastels, I find that blending with this solvent is best to use like as stiff as a brush as possible. I was using this brush here chiefly. I don't know if you can see this or not, but it's a small round brush. It's a size 6, but it's fairly worn down. So I went and got me another brush, and this brush has got a lot stiffer bristles. You want to stay away from brushes that are like squirrel and brushes that are designed for watercolor and stuff like that that's real soft. So basically what I do is dip the brush in the turpenoid and just kind of go over the colors, and I'm basically making a wash. That's the term that is used in watercolor paintings. And I don't see too many people do this that do oil pastel paintings. And there's one trick to this, is you have to be careful using oil pastels when you go to blend like this. You have to make sure that you've got enough pigment down that's covered the surface, because if you don't, I've noticed that whenever I photograph my paintings to put on my site to sell, I see, once I photographed it, I see a lot of gaps and areas in the painting that do not show up. I mean, you can see the paper through the painting, the pastel. So it's always a good idea to, once you put down an initial layer, it's a good idea to go back over it and put down more over top of it with a second layer, just as it's added to security that you'll have enough pigment there. Basically, I'm dabbing it on a paper towel. Dabbing it on a paper towel controls the amount of fluid that you put down. It isn't really recommended to do this kind of technique on real thin, lightweight watercolor paper like 114 pound and 90 pound, whatever, because it'll buckle the paper real bad and it'll kind of bleed through, if you will. There you have it. There is, that's the technique that I use most in blending my oil pastels.